Now that we've explored in detail within a single cell, how a single cell interacts with its environment as well as between other cells, as well as how we can then make more cells from a single cell, it is finally time for us to dive into our final unit and explore life at the multicellular level, looking at species and populations. Let's begin the next chapter in our journey by exploring the origin of species. Hello everyone, welcome to our discussion on the fascinating topic of the origin of species. Today, we'll be delving into the theory of evolution, the evidence supporting it, various mechanisms of evolution, and the factors that influence the pace of evolution and extinction. By the end of this lesson, you will have a solid understanding of these concepts and then be able to apply them to real-world scenarios. Let's get started. To begin, let's define the theory of evolution. Evolution is the process by which the allele frequency of a population gradually changes over time, which can result in the formation of new species. It is the process of adaptation through mutation which allows more desirable characteristics to be passed on to the next generation. Over time, organisms evolve more characteristics that are beneficial to their survival. For living organisms to adapt and change to environmental pressures, genetic variation must be present. With genetic variation, individuals have differences in form and function that allows some to survive certain conditions better than others. These organisms pass their favorable traits to their offspring. Eventually, though, environments change, and what was once a desirable, advantageous trait may become an undesirable trait, driving adaptation and further evolution of a species. We can actually observe evidence of evolution by means of DNA code and the fossil record, and also by the existence of homologous and vestigial structures. Evolution may be divergent, with diverse traits evolving in multiple species that come from a common ancestor, or it can be convergent, with similar traits evolving in multiple species. And with evolution comes new species. Speciation is a term we use to describe the process by which new species form. It occurs when groups in a species become reproductively isolated and diverge, forming a new species. Speciation occurs along two main pathways: geographic separation, called allopatric speciation, and through mechanisms that occur within a shared habitat, or sympatric speciation. Both pathways isolate a population reproductively in some form, leading to that formation of new species. Mechanisms of reproductive isolation act as barriers between closely related species, enabling them to diverge and exist as genetically independent species. Prezygotic, pre meaning before, and zygotic referring to the formation of a zygote, prezygotic barriers block reproduction before the formation of a zygote. In contrast, postzygotic barriers block reproduction after fertilization occurs, post meaning after. Prezygotic isolation mechanisms include the ones that you see on the screen here, such as temporal isolation, meaning breeding at different times, habitat isolation, referring to inhabiting different habitats. Some people also call this ecological isolation. There's also behavioral isolation, meaning a lack of attraction or incompatible mating behaviors. And then there's also mechanical isolation, referring to structural differences that prevent mating. The last one that's actually not on here that we also sometimes discuss is something called gametic isolation, meaning an incompatibility between gametes. On the other hand, with postzygotic isolation mechanisms occur when hybrid offspring of two different species have reduced fitness or are infertile. Examples include reduced hybrid viability, meaning the hybrid creatures that are produced do not survive to reproductive age. There's also reduced hybrid fertility, meaning hybrids are unable to reproduce, and hybrid breakdown, meaning that the F1 hybrids are viable and fertile, but the next generation, the F2s, and subsequent generations have reduced fitness. Make sense? All right, so now with that, let's relate these isolation mechanisms to some real-world examples. Consider two bird species. Eastern meadowlarks inhabit the eastern regions of North America, while western meadowlarks reside in the western parts of the continent. These two species have overlapping habitats, but they have distinct songs and mating behaviors. During the breeding season, male eastern meadowlarks sing a unique and melodious song to attract females and establish their territories. Female eastern meadowlarks are specifically attuned to this song and are more likely to choose mates based on the familiarity of the song. Conversely, male western meadowlarks have a different song pattern that is specific to their species. Female western meadowlarks are more responsive to the song of their own western meadowlark species and are unlikely to mate with the eastern meadowlarks due to the dissimilarity in their songs. So with this in mind, would you consider this to be a prezygotic or postzygotic isolation mechanism? Great, okay, so this difference in mating songs acts as a prezygotic isolation mechanism as it prevents successful mating attempts between eastern and western meadowlarks. The distinct songs and mating behaviors of each species serves as a reproductive barrier, maintaining the genetic uniqueness of the two populations. This behavioral isolation acts as the prezygotic barrier. All right, and so this prevents gene flow between these species. On the other hand, if a horse and a donkey produce a mule, the mule will always be infertile. And this is a perfect example of a postzygotic isolation. Now, let's explore the two primary modes of speciation, allopatric speciation and sympatric speciation.